All right, I want to talk today about reading multiple books at once. This is something that I've not really addressed very much, but I have a tendency in my life to read more than one book at a time. Uh, and because the reading has multiple purposes. So, my reading sort of behavior is that every morning I wake up, I go into my living room and sit in my favorite chair, and I read at least two or three different books in the morning. So usually, what I have like I'm reading a book right now called uh, Common Prayer, a Liturgy for Ordinary Radicals, which was written by a few people, probably the most well known of whom is Shane Claiborne. And so there is a liturgy for every day in there, as well as scripture reading, and I read that every morning. After I read that, I usually will read a couple, either one or two Christian books that I'm reading primarily to help me to live a better life that's more in line with the values that are important to me. So, for instance, at the moment right now, I'm reading two books that go with that. One of those is a book called Take the Day Off. It's by the pastor of the church I attend. I attend Gateway Church in North Texas. His name's Robert Morris, and it's about resting, taking a Sabbath break, and prioritizing rest, which is something I think our culture does not do very well, and something I especially need to learn how to do better. The other book that I'm reading is a book called "Experiencing the Depths of Experiencing the Depths of Jesus" by Madame Jean Guyon. Now, that book is one that I've read a long time ago. It's one of my favorite books on faith. Madame Jean Guyon is someone that would be labeled a Christian mystic, which a lot of the early, desert fathers and stuff might fall into that category as well. But really focusing on the contemplative life in prayer and in faith. And because that book has been so meaningful to me, and it's been a long time since I read it, I wanted to reread it as well. So in the morning, most of my reading early in the morning is about sort of focusing myself so that I can be a better person as I go into my daily life. Okay? So right now, that's sort of three books, although I don't necessarily count the liturgy book because it's sort of like a part of scripture reading. Then, in addition to that, I will read a fiction book. And so as a teacher, one of my priorities is to encourage self-selected reading by my students, because I believe that if I can get my students to learn to love reading again, that I will have done them the best service I could possibly do while we're as far as teaching goes. I will, them learning to love reading will help them to develop all the other necessary skills that are so critical, so important to the academic life and to their future life as adults. So I just finished a really big book that was like 980 pages, and it was a heavy young adult, maybe on the edge of new adult fantasy book. It was the end of a long series called Kingdom of Ash. It was the end of the Throne of Glass series. So now I'm starting a shorter fantasy series, which is the first book in the Wingfeather saga called On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. This is written by Andrew Peterson. Andrew Peterson is a musician as well who's released several albums. This is sort of a middle grade fantasy series. There are 4 books, and then there's a bind up of short stories. I've heard wonderful things about this from a lot of people, that in many ways it's sort of in the tradition of some of the books that I love, like the Chronicles of Narnia, maybe The Hobbit. And so I definitely want to dive into this and read this. So every day I have my students read for 10 minutes at the beginning of class, whatever it is that they want to read. And I read with them because I want to model that I don't just say I love reading, I actually love reading, and I read at the same time that they do. Oftentimes I'll talk about these books that I'm reading in class with the kids in hopes that maybe that book will register and connect with one of those kids as well. So that means that I'm currently reading, at least 2 or maybe 3, depending on how you count them, books in the morning, and then I'm reading another book as the day goes on. In addition to that, sometimes I listen to a lot of podcasts, but sometimes I will listen to an audiobook in the car going to and from work. So I have an audiobook right now that I have not quite yet started, but that I plan on starting very soon. And let's see if I can pull that up real quick. So that would be, I'll just show you a picture of it. that would be this book called Tempest Runner. It's actually an audio drama by Cavan Scott, and it's in that Star Wars High Republic series. It's about a 6-hour audio drama on Audible, and that is one that I'm picking up hopefully real soon as well. So I have the 3 books in the morning, this book that I do in my classroom, and an audio book. And that may seem like a lot to all of you, because how do you keep them all straight? But because they're sort of sectioned into these different parts of my day for different purposes, it's actually really easy for me to focus on them one at a time. I don't take notes in my fiction books. I do take notes in my nonfiction books, so that really helps me to keep track in my nonfiction books. But ultimately, doing that all day really helps me to have a great sort of reader life. Also at home right now, so I guess I can even add more, I am every night after we eat dinner, I'm reading a chapter from the Chronicles of Narnia to my kids. They've never read the Chronicles of Narnia before. I really love the Chronicles of Narnia, and I'm trying to increase their attention span as well, and to increase their interest in this kind of fiction. So we're about 11 or 12 chapters into The Magician's Nephew, the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia. And for the most part, they seem to be loving it. Some days are harder than others to keep their attention long enough for a simple chapter, but for the most part, they seem to be really loving it. And finally, in addition to that, I am reading the Bluebonnet Award nominees to my son, well, to both my kids, but primarily we're focused on my son because he's going to participate in voting this year. So he's going to vote this year, and when he finishes voting this year, we'll have gone through all the books together for him to decide what he thinks about them. And so that's it. The 3 books in the morning. Again, the book in my with my class, the audiobook in my car, the book with my kids, and then the Bluebonnet Awards with my kids as well. So got a lot of books going, but it makes me very happy to be engaging in all those different kinds of books.